There are untold tales behind the Rat Pack's charisma and allure, which have enchanted audiences for decades. Ernest Borgnine, a legendary figure in Hollywood, has now chosen to speak up about the mysterious Dean Martin. Behind his charming facade, what was Martin like? Had Borgnine been privy to any secrets? The secrets of a friendship that defined a unique era in Hollywood are about to be revealed. Your whole understanding of the King of Cool is about to be shattered by this shocking revelation. The connection between Ernest Borgnine and Dean Martin needs to be addressed first. As an actor, Borgnine is really gifted. On the set of the epic film From Here to Eternity, he could have thought, this is going to be a musical because Frank Sinatra is in it. Regardless, he encounters Dean Martin while filming, and the memory of their interaction stays with him forever. As Borgnine explains, I'm walking off the set, and Dean Martin comes on stage and says to the audience, now there's an actor. It dawned on him that this wasn't an idle compliment. Dean meant it. What about Dean Martin? A troubled childhood befell this Ohioan, whose given name is Dino Paolucci. He spoke Italian at home and had a hard time learning English in school. He eventually left out. Breaking the rules, nevertheless, may yield some of the most compelling stories. From boxing to bootlegging, he dabbled in everything. Under the ring, he went by the moniker Kid Crochet as well. At last, he discovered his musical rhythm. He began to sing, which caught people's attention, and they followed him. But then World War II happened. After serving his country in the military, he was relieved of his duties and returned to the entertainment industry. Jerry Lewis steps in at that point. Jerry Lewis, the unpredictable comic, meets Dean Martin, the polished operator. Passion ignited when they crossed paths at a nightclub. They became a legendary team, and the rest is, well, history. Next, the dynamic pair of Dean, the silky vocalist, and Jerry, the physical comedy king, collaborated for a musical comedy event. They went hand in hand like cold and fire. Well, it wasn't exactly a standing ovation when they made their debut at Atlantic City's 500 Club. Instead than being entertained, the audience seemed bewildered. Skinny D'Amato, the club owner, practically threatened to fire them unless they improved their performance. Their resiliency, nevertheless, was remarkable. They started again from scratch, and wow, were they successful this time. They performed a spectacular second concert. In the middle of Dean's song, Jerry would cut him off, leading to a funny stage chase. Then there was this scene when Jerry, playing the role of an inept waiter, would interrupt Dean's performance by crashing plates and causing mayhem. There was a riot in the crowd. They shot to fame, becoming the town's buzz, and eventually appearing on The Ed Sullivan Show. They engaged some excellent writers to assist them in developing their act, since they were aware they needed to step it up a notch. Optimism was high. They made a shitload of money, $775,000, when they inked a radio agreement with Paramount. However, there were obstacles on the path to achievement. A quarrel broke out between Dean and Jerry. Jerry, in Dean's opinion, was overly prominent, and the emphasis was on the slapstick rather than the music. Despite his desires to pursue other opportunities, they were essentially constrained by their contract with Paramount. The situation deteriorated significantly at that point. The plot is rather pitiful. Visualize this. You and your closest friend are performing in front of a raucous audience when suddenly, poof, the cover of a magazine will no longer include your face. That's essentially what occurred to Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin, the two comedians. Dean felt completely ignored by Jerry, which severely damaged their friendship. The two were a powerful combination. After their wild and outrageous three-ring circus show in 1954, everything fell apart. There was even a magazine spread featuring them, but you won't believe who suddenly wasn't there. Hello, Dean. Dean, visibly irritated, decided he'd had enough of Paramount and Jerry, and as soon as his contract ended, bolted. Everyone now assumed Dean was going to have a catastrophic failure. Without Jerry, he's nothing, they mocked. Fortunately, Dean showed them all that they were mistaken. He went alone to pursue his singing career, and my, did he ever have a voice. Everybody Loves Somebody, That's Amore, and Memories Are Made Of. This were wonderful songs. But being a musician wasn't enough for Dean. He aspired to acting and stardom in films. His early acting career was uneventful despite his best efforts. Next, in 1958, we had The Young Lions. Dean found himself thrust back into the limelight when this war film became a smashing success. John Wayne, Ricky Nelson, and the rest of Hollywood's elite were mingling with him. In fact, he received a Golden Globe nomination. After then, Dean's performance blossomed. He not only appeared in, but also produced a plethora of films. A genuine icon, he became a legend. Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, and the Rat Pack were the epitome of wild party animals. At each performance, they wowed the crowd with their singing, jokes, and charisma. Nothing has ever been seen like that in Vegas. The Dean Martin Show quickly joined as well. Picture this. Dean, dapper as ever in his tux, would host a television show where he would chat with guests, crack a few jokes, some would say too many, and generally enjoy himself. Even though NBC's censors were always monitoring him, the show was a huge success. Dean was a loving family man away from the camera. He loved his family very much, despite his reputation as a playboy. According to his pals, he wasn't really a heavy drinker, unlike how he seemed on TV. Finally, after all these years, Dean and Jerry put their differences aside. For them, it was a moving occasion. Later on, everything ran smoothly until March 1987, when Dean suffered a terrible loss. The tragic plane accident killed Dean Paul Martin, the son of vocalist Dean Martin. Everything about it, flying with the Air National Guard and all, was tragic. It was a huge blow to Dean, who went into a tailspin, hit rock bottom, and sought solace in alcohol. Taking him on tour was Frank Sinatra's attempt to lift his spirits, but it was like putting fuel on a fire. That cigarette never budged from Dean's lips, and he was entirely absorbed in his bottle. Speaking of cigarettes, he finally felt the effects of his long history of chain smoking. The diagnosis of lung cancer was conveyed to him in 1993. Even if surgery was a possibility, Dean's obstinate will wouldn't allow it. He spent more time with his loved ones, hid from prying eyes, and eventually disappeared. His untimely demise occurred on Christmas Day, 1995, when he was 78 years old. Losing this icon was a tragedy for everyone. The Las Vegas Strip even turned down the lights in his tribute. Dean Martin departed the road that led him from an illiterate youth to a worldwide superstar. After introducing Dean Martin, let's talk about his relationship with Shirley Borgnine. In his own words, Borgnine provided us a look inside their friendship, revealing a side of Dean beyond his macho reputation and Rat Pack swagger. Dino was more than meets the eye. He was a trustworthy friend and a devoted companion. Let us now turn our attention to Ernie. He came from modest beginnings, being born Hermes Ephron Borgnine. As the son of Italian immigrants, he spent his childhood in a working-class household in Connecticut. Joining the Navy after high school was the natural next step for any patriotic American. He was immediately back in uniform and serving his nation when World War II broke out. After returning from the war, Ernie felt disoriented and unsure of his future. Working at a factory wasn't exactly Ernest Borgnine's cup of tea. He quickly realized that his mom saw his abilities better than everyone else. Most youngsters would have rolled their eyes at her suggestion that he earn money for constantly embarrassing himself in public, but Ernest had a light bulb moment when she said it. It was as if a light bulb went out in his brain as he sat at the kitchen table. 10 years later, Grace Kelly presented him with an Oscar. Beginning his training at Hartford's Randall School of Drama, he later became a member of Virginia's Barter Theater, a hidden treasure that allowed Great Depression-era residents to exchange goods like eggs and apples for tickets. In 1947, he made his acting debut in the film State of the Union. Even though his role was little, the public adored him. He continued his impressive run with Tennessee Williams' The Glass Menagerie, when he played the role of the gentleman caller and demonstrated his dramatic chops. After preparing for the Big Apple for some time, he finally made his Broadway debut in the 1949 musical Harvey, playing the role of a nurse. Afterwards, television arrived. Captain Video and his Video Rangers were his first gigs. Does it not sound cheesy? But it let a deluge of information in. Countless places featured him, including the Goodyear Television Playhouse and the Larry I. Fireside Theater. His debut film appearance was in 1951's The Whistle at Eaton Falls, and he was quickly beckoned by Hollywood. His breakout role, however, was as the villainous Sergeant Fatso Judson in the film From Here to Eternity. The film's critical acclaim led to its Best Picture Oscar, putting Borgnine in the public eye. At last, Borgnine showed he wasn't scared to play the villain. His breakout year was 1955. However, he had a history of playing villains in films such as Johnny Guitar and Vera Cruz. Everyone fell head over heels for him after seeing him in Marty as the charming and timid butcher. The picture took home several Oscars, and Borgnine was named Best Actor against competition from Frank Sinatra and James Dean. Furthermore, he was presented with a Golden Globe and a BAFTA. His Captain Video days really shone through. Fame on television followed. He became a member of the ragged group of misfits in the 1-2 sitcom Marines Navy in 1962. Ernest portrayed the stern yet endearing Captain Quentin McHale, who commanded his eccentric crew with an iron fist. The show's popularity was immediate. Before the end of its first season, it had cracked the top 30. He was beloved by fans and was even nominated for an Emmy. However, the show concluded in 1966 after 4 seasons, since the humor became a bit old. However, Borgnine's career continued unabated. He was ubiquitous for the following 30 years. The Dirty Dozen, Escape from New York, and The Poseidon Adventure were among his big-screen appearances. The Wild Bunch, a morally charged Western, even featured him as Dutch. After the fact, Borgnine remarked, "Every picture should have a moral. Back in the day, the bad guys always got what was coming to them. Now it seems like they're running the show." And then there was television. Oh, he was also great at that. He was on every single channel you could imagine, from Little House on the Prairie to Magnum, P.I., The Love Boat, and Touched by an Angel. Following this, Borgnine became Hollywood's first choice for, well, everything. Dramas, comedies, westerns, you name it. He was great at it all. Despite his advanced age, he continued to labor tirelessly, making a triumphant return to the last episodes of ER. The famous Ernest Borgnine never appeared to slow down throughout his illustrious career. He returned to Universal Studios in 1983 for the successful series Airwolf, co-starring Jan Michael Vincent. After witnessing P.I. Borgnine wrestling in an episode of Magnum in 1982, producer Donald P. Belisario personally approached him. Borgnine accepted the part of the charming helicopter pilot Dominic Santini without hesitation. Borgnine worked himself to the bone behind the scenes. Despite the show's huge success, anyone would have been worn out by the demanding schedule and constant bickering with his younger co-star. You would think that CBS would have given Borgnine a much-needed break when they canceled the show in 1986. In 1989, Borgnine and Brandon Lee were filming Laser Mission in Namibia. Although it was released in 1990, the film was unsuccessful in winning any Academy Awards. He reprised his role as the most endearing doorman in the world, Manny Cordoba, in 1995's The Single Guy. Being the first one on set, the last one to go, and likely making jokes in between takes gave Borgnine more energy than the whole ensemble put together, according to co-star Jonathan Silverman. In the 1996 whimsical fantasy film Merlin's Shop of Mystical Wonders, Borgnine displayed his daring side as he recounted the tale of a monkey toy with a cursed ability to bang cymbals that had been taken from Merlin. Very much so. After receiving a hilarious roasting on Mystery Science Theater 3000, the film, which initially bombed, managed to acquire a cult following. Borgnine rode a bus throughout the United States that same year to visit with admirers and take in the sights. A documentary named Ernest Borgnine on the Bus was made on his voyage in 1997. Along the way, he made sure to stop by VA facilities to pay his respects to the nation's hospitalized veterans. After stepping down as Rear Admiral Quentin McHale in Mel's Navy in 1997, Borgnine gave the role and the name to Tom Arnold, who played the character's son. A year down the road, he made an appearance in the comedy Baseball as a rich businessman who was just as amusing and similarly absurd. Tim Conway, a fellow Marine, played Barnacle Boy, and he went on to play SpongeBob SquarePants Mermaid Man, his most famous character in his later years. Being a retired superhero was a position that Borgnine wholeheartedly embraced. The parents, as well as the children, adored him. What a touching memorial. Nickelodeon aired all of his Mermaid Man episodes after his death. That wasn't the end of Borgnine. He has a starring role in the 2007 Hallmark holiday film, A Grandpa for Christmas. He became the oldest nominee in Golden Globe history at the age of 90 for the touching film about a distant grandfather's reconciliation with his granddaughter. In the midst of all this, he managed to pen his autobiography, Ernie, which read more like, "Let's sit down and share some amazing stories," than a somber memoir. Borgnine broke hearts in 2009 as he played the role of a husband witnessing his wife's death on the last season of ER. His first Emmy nomination in over 30 years came from his deeply emotional performance. He proved that age was nothing more than a number that year, as he featured in The King of Cool in Another Harvest Moon, despite being 92 years old. In 2010, he had a hilarious appearance on Saturday Night Live alongside Morgan Freeman. In 2011, he completed his last picture, The Man Who Shook the Hand of Vicente Fernandez. His career in cinema came to a fitting end in 2010. Borgnine maintained his charm, active schedule, sense of humor, and devotion to his admirers throughout his life. When it comes to being said to as unstoppable, Ernest Borgnine is without peer. Legends Borgnine and Martin followed quite different careers, yet they were both groundbreaking figures. The good part is about to begin. Actor Ernest Borgnine told a tale that exemplifies Dean's charisma. Imagine Dean Martin, the king of cool, casually offering you a praise as if it were no big thing. Borgnine overheard Martin pointing to him and saying, "Now there's an actor," after a scene had been shot on location. The news stunned Borgnine. He had always had a soft spot for Dean, but to hear such glowing praise would have made his week, or year perhaps. It was so simple to bond with Dean, and Borgnine went on to call him the real deal, the most lovely man. Their strong relationship blossomed from their first connection. Dean, here's the thing. He never wanted to be the center of attention. He helped others even though he was a megastar. Whereas Hollywood is sometimes a battleground for egos and rivalries, Dean was the one who showed everyone the ropes, with a wink, a drink, and a talent for making people feel like millionaires. In celebration, let us toast that. More than simply Hollywood stories, Ernest Borgnine's recollections of Dean Martin show how one person's true kindness and compassion can transform another's life. From Borgnine's vantage point, the truthful Dean Martin was much more than the charismatic, martini-drinking hero we saw on TV. Sure, Martin had an air of effortless sophistication, but underneath that smooth exterior was a man who was genuine, modest, and strangely enough, just as down-to-earth as your next-door neighbor who still cuts his grass. Dean was more than just another famous face swept away by the limelight, according to Borgnine. This man was legit. You could always count on him to make you feel special. His generosity was genuine and unforced. Never lose sight of the fact that the man was too generous, seeking guidance, amusement, or simply a supportive ally. Everyone knew Dean, not to mention his hilarious antics. Martin has the ability to tell jokes that could penetrate even the hardest of hearts. Borgnine has mentioned how Dean's humor served as the unifying force in their friendship. No matter how bad things become, he was the type of person that could lift your spirits and make you feel better. But there was a guy behind that perpetual grin, and he carried his difficulties with him. Because of how tight their relationship was, only a select handful, like Borgnine, got to see that side of him. Dean's superpower wasn't only his brilliance, but rather his capacity to maintain his humanity in the face of overwhelming popularity. He was beloved by his fans and esteemed by his colleagues, but his genuine compassion was what truly set him apart. Borgnine's seen it all, the glitz, the modesty, and those rare occasions when Martin would shock you by being an ordinary person with a huge heart. It wasn't a Hollywood, we work together so we're friends arrangement. Borgnine and Martin's connection was genuine. In contrast to Martin's carefree coolness, Borgnine exemplified the serious, diligent kind. They were so unlike each other, yet they managed to operate together. Not only did they form an unbreakable friendship, but it was also based on trust, humor, and a sincerity that is unusual even in Hollywood. Ultimately, Borgnine's anecdotes serve as a reminder that despite his notoriety, Martin was merely a good friend, an admirable human being, and someone with whom we all would have liked to have had a drink. You don't often see a friendship like the one between Borgnine and Martin, particularly in the entertainment industry. No matter how good or bad things became, they remained steadfastly united. In the face of the unfathomable sorrow of losing his son, Dean Paul Jr., in an airplane disaster, Borgnine stood by Martin's side, offering genuine comfort rather than false platitudes. Instead of offering advice or making light of the situation, he just showed up, perhaps with a strong shoulder and a bottle of something substantial, because that's what friends do. Additionally, it was a two-way street. Martin always had Borgnine's back when he was having a bad day at the office or one of those "am I even good at this?" moments that everyone has. Even if he didn't perform pom-poms and cartwheels, he would still pay Borgnine a visit, give him a call, and tell him how talented he was and how much he meant to everyone who knew him. You could basically always count on him to give you a shoulder shake and exclaim, "Snap out of it, you're amazing." However, their relationship extended beyond simply serious matters. It was clear that these two were born to laugh. The simple pleasures of hanging together were what brought them the most satisfaction, whether they were on set or chasing a golf ball. Everyone on set had a great time thanks to their hilarious conversation, which could have stood on its own comedy show. Their connection was unique because of how genuine it was. They ignored the superficialities and zeroed in on the other person's essence. Nothing except two men who cared deeply for one another, no egos, no phony grins. Their bond was as unusual as a spotless automobile in post-rain Los Angeles in a society when selfies and superficial relationships are the norm. The bond between Borgnine and Martin serves as a poignant reminder that true success comes from having supportive loved ones by your side through the good times and the bad. You need a friend who will be there for you through thick and thin, sharing your jokes and maybe even footing the bill when things go south in life or on the golf course.